Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animated features not made by Disney. I'm your host, Octaviano, and unfortunately, yes, my schedule's still been a bit hectic. That's not to say that I haven't been working on stuff. I've been trying to create a new logo. I'm creating a new logo for the channel, so, it's other stuff. But, there's also some personal stuff, so it's not like I've, not been trying to do this. It's just that I have been kind of busy. But hopefully I do get to a movie next week on the next episode. That being said, I still figured, okay, I still got a little time. Might as well talk about something animation related. Something that I think I don't think I've made clear enough before. So I feel like maybe I should kind of give you guys an idea on that. One of the most important things about animation is, the most important thing is the animation itself. Now, that's not to say that a project is determined by its animation. There's been, good movies with not so good animation and bad movies with great animation. I would say, granted, this is not that bad of a movie, but it's not a very good movie. The original DreamWorks Trolls movie, not a very good movie, but the animation is spectacular. I guess just to kind of give you an idea of the kinds of stuff that I like in my animation. And I do apologize if you can hear it a bit noisy. Right now, it's kind of windy, so I'm not sure how much that is coming through on this, but just in case, if you're wondering why there's a bunch of loud noises, that might be it. Okay, animation. Do I like it 2D? Do I like it 3D? Do I like it with stop motion? Do I like it drawn? What exactly is it? I like all kinds of animation. It doesn't really matter to me. I've never been one to be preferential. When I was younger, I was probably more on the whole, 3D is bad, we need more 2D. As I've gotten older, I've gotten wiser about it. Now, granted, I do have a special place in my heart for 2D animation. I do love drawn stuff. I do love the classic Disney look, or just hand-drawn animation. Whichever way you look at it. I'm pretty much here rooting for the upcoming Bob's Burgers movies just because it's a theatrical 2D movie. Even though the way it's being animated is, of course, different from the way it would normally be with hand-drawn animation. It's still pretty much like a very CG kind of thing with controlling it via a 2D puppet, but it's still a 2D animated feature, so it's still got a special look, a special look that I love. But yeah, I've kind of grown past that mentality of 3D is bad. A lot of what I've seen, a lot of people still kind of have. Some of them have kind of moved on. I don't see it as often as I used to, but I still get it enough where it's okay, come on guys, we've been on this for who knows how long. You gotta adjust to this, You can't just be constantly hating on CG animation. And you could have a preference, I'm not saying you can't, but to flat out, just hate on it is just kind of sad at this point. But, I'd be lying if I said that I didn't, prefer 2D over 3D. And that's because it's just, aside from the thing that I grew up on, it's just got a really nice look to it that's really unique. The thing I have with CG animation is that even when it's really great, there's a lot of them that look kind of similar to each other. Of course, over the years, we've started seeing more different stuff. Sony has definitely pushed the animation in new, great ways. We see the Hotel Transylvania movies, the Cloud Adventures Meatballs, Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse. Those movies have really gone out of their way to showcase, we can do different things with animation. Blue Sky, did that Peanuts movie that was really great. But even then, notice how a lot of those still need to, in order to stand out, they go back to looking in, their 2D animated features. Which is why I'm at the end of the day, that's where a lot of that great love comes from. Again, not to say that 3D is bad, I do love it. Pixar is especially great as they've continued to evolve. You can see that whether it's looking realistic or cartoony, it's just amazing. I'm looking forward to their next one, Turning Red, which should have been theatrical, but whatever. It's all great stuff. I don't want to go too deep into this. Maybe leave it as a topic, for another day. But I will say that, of course, if there's definitely a thing is that I want is that 2D animation makes a big comeback. a few years ago, I was kind of like, okay, here's my prediction on 2D animation. It's going to come back, but it's going to be more on adult-oriented animated features. It's going to be like the stuff that you get for the more mature stuff, since most of the people who want it back are adults, whereas kids, most of them haven't really experienced it unless they've been shown by their parents. But if they're just going by whatever movies that are new or they're watching, it's mostly going to be 3D that they've experienced. So it was like, okay, that's got to be the next big thing. Like, we're going to start seeing some adult animated features, like stuff that's going to be like PG-13, R-rated, or just stuff that is not really geared towards kids, and it's going to be 2D animated. Sadly, didn't happen. And it's still one of those things that I'm like, look, not that I expect all my predictions to come true, but it's one of the ones where I was just like, yeah, that's kind of sad that that's the one that didn't. Because, 2D animation is really great. We've seen some come out every now and then, like Klaus, still an incredible looking feature, and it's a good example of what they could do with the animation style to make it look fresh, to make it look new, and to just evolve it. If that's what they're worried about, that they can't evolve it, which you could always improve upon what's being done. I don't see why that's a limitation that some people might see with this stuff. But, whatever. Now, what exactly makes a good animation? And that's kind of hard to say because a lot of people often assume there's only one way to do good animation. When it comes to CG, they expect it to be real. Like, the more real it looks, the better it looks. When it comes to 2D animation, they're expecting it to be like, that one's given a little more leeway, but it's still like, okay, they still want a kind of realistic look to it. Not to the degree of a 3D animation, of course, but to a point that you're seeing, like, people moving, very fluidly, people's designs, feeling kind of human-like, like not very stylized, that kind of thing. But yeah, going to those two specific ones, CG and the 2D features. With 2D features, I've always been kind of annoyed when people are like, oh yeah, anime specifically is like one of the better animation styles because, which, I'm not saying that you can't think that. I think anime looks great at times, but it also has its limitations. The designs can feel very samey at times, but you got people who think like, okay, that's the way that you should be doing animation because, they make the people look like people. They don't try to, play with the sizes and whatnot. And I'm like, well, that's one way of looking at it. I mean, certainly it's nice, but even with anime, you can get that choppy animation a lot of the time because they do have their limits, and it's within a lot of the style. So, that's not necessarily good. Like, of course, there's people who think like, okay, Disney and Disney style animation is the right way to do it, which, again, yeah, Disney, I love their style. Even they kind of broke away from it, a few times, especially during the 2000s when they did like their last few animated features. Even with them, it's like, okay, yeah, it is nice, how they make them look almost not exactly, I mean, people say human-like, but, of course, there's still going to be the stuff that they mess with, like the eyes and whatnot, but I'm like, okay, yeah, but again, it's not the only way. I've seen, stuff like Secret of Kells or Wolfwalkers, which has a very stylized look, and it's really greatly animated. So, what creates that? And at the end of the day, 2D, I'd say, would have, like, the most leeway of all the other ones on how you do good 2D, because, with stop motion, even though I say that there's never been one that I've seen that's bad, for the most part, it just comes down to, like, okay, as long as they're making the characters move, well, that's fine. With 2D, it's like, okay, sometimes you go with, like, something that looks closer to realistic, sometimes it's, like, halfway, sometimes it's completely stylized to the point that it does not look like a real person. Like, if you put this next to someone, you would not really notice the similarities other than just the few things that you're like, okay, yeah, that's how a person is kind of drawn, I guess, if this person was being weird about it. So there's more of a leeway on that than there is on other stuff, like you could go with variety styles, which is why I love it so much. The coloring could be a variety of stuff. You could have more shadows, less shadows. You could have very specific colors. You can make it look natural. You can make it look very neon, weird, like that kind of stuff on a lot of the coloring with animation, and it'll look neat if you do it right. Realistically, what makes something unappealing in 2D is normally just if there's a lack of movement, and this of course does happen when people try to go a little too stylized. Sometimes it goes into a pretty ugly looking design. Not that I want to be mean about it, but when it came to something like a lot of the classic Kuspo animated stuff, like, Rugrats, Rocket Power, that kind of stuff, a lot of it to me was very unappealing. The Rugrats was definitely like one of the more appealing looking stuff from them, at least when they stayed 2D. Once they did the 3D, you can start to see the ugliness in it, but at least with 3D, it was like, with 2D, it was like, okay, well, since they're babies and it's being told from their point of view, maybe it's supposed to represent, like the way a toddler or a baby would look at the world, so it's kind of simplified in that way, so that's why it kind of works. But then you get stuff like Rocket Power or As Told by Ginger, where it's supposed to be like teens or preteens, so to speak, and it just looks nasty. Like, you already got a pretty nasty looking style, and it, maybe it does complement it in a way, because it's, with preteens, you got like the gross out humor, especially with it being a Nickelodeon thing, but it gets to a point where it's like, I don't know, it's just never been that appealing to me. It's one of the things that kind of made me not really get into like the Wild Thornberries, because it's like, with the Wild Thornberries, it feels like, okay, this is supposed to be a little bit more not wholesome. I mean, I guess in a way kind of wholesome, but like, it's not supposed to be as nasty as those other shows that I just mentioned, but it still has this style, and it's just like, I don't know, man. It just does not look appealing. It should be, either something a little more cutesy, or at least a little more proper for like this documentary animal traveling show or whatever that the show pretty much centers on. But normally speaking, it comes down to the movement that can ruin it. It's just that even then, if you provide a good enough reason for why it looks a certain way, that's why it's that way, I can enjoy it. I mean, something like South Park, which is another 2D animated show. Granted, this was originally supposed to be cutouts, then became Flash. I don't know if it's still Flash or if it's another thing, but it's pretty much what it is. Granted, I wouldn't put it on the top of animation or anything like that, but while I have my problems with South Park, the show's just kind of tiresome. It's not that funny. It was funny at early on, but as of late, I just, I don't know, like within the last decade or so, I've just gotten tired of it. But that's really besides the point. The animation style is like, it's fine. I can't really call it bad when it's intentionally trying to look like a crummy homemade project, and it's reflecting the fact that it's this show about kids shit talking, so it's like, I can't complain about that. But moving on, I guess with 3D, that's where it gets a little harder, but I still think that the whole, it has to look real is wrong to that extent. I like Pixar's approach to realism. Like, of course, the landscapes and everything is very realistic, but when it comes to the characters, details on them are very realistic, whether it comes down to like the way the characters, like the clothing, or the hairs on them, or even the fact that a lot of the newer Pixar films, like if you pay attention, you'll notice that they're constantly breathing, even when it's not something that they're supposed to focus on, like the characters feel alive. So that kind of stuff is neat. But of course, I do like my stylized stuff on there, and I think a lot of people are kind of going towards that, with a lot of people loving like Into the Spider-Verse and the Mitchells vs. Machines. Stuff like Hotel Transylvania, one of the best looking CG animated movies. It's just a really good example of how you can create 2D looking stuff through 3D. So that was neat. But yeah, it's the same thing with 2D. It all depends on how they're done. I feel like it's a little more strict when it comes to CG because when it comes to CG, you can't get away with the whole ugly look, something like Rugrats, as easy. Because with Rugrats, technically speaking, the detail is not bad. The detail is good. It's just that those designs do not work for 3D. So it's something that you definitely have to think of. It doesn't need to be realistic. Like I said, there's been other stuff where it's not. I mean, the Peanuts is a great example because they make them look exactly like the 2D drawings, which are very crude, like this very simple thing. And within the passage of 3D, it worked. But that's mostly because they were so close to it that it almost looked like a 2D feature, just with 3D elements. Which is the big difference with that to like something like the Rugrats, where the CG version is like, no, this is clearly a CG thing that's just got the designs of the 2D thing, but they didn't bother making it look like it was a 2D thing. Another one that did that well was the Captain Underpants movie. That one also went with like, okay, let's make it look almost like the drawings. It's much more clean and smooth than the Peanuts, which works for it. It wouldn't have worked for the Peanuts. So it really depends. I think with that, you do get a lot of stuff like, okay, we're embracing the stylization of stuff, and it's great. The drawback is that it makes it look more like a 2D feature, which is not bad, but it shows like, yeah, maybe that's because 3D works best when it's kind of exploring these styles instead of exploring its own style, which again, not they don't have it bad. I mean, Pixar has, for the most part, features that are 3D centric. It's not like them going with 2D, and they look great. Of course, they've started playing around with doing some more 2D-esque styles with like Turning Red and Luca, which again looks great. But when they do either one, it's well animated. I mean, honestly, the biggest hurdle for CG animation is time, because unfortunately when it comes to some of these things, and I feel like they've of course gotten really good with it now, where as long as it's to a certain degree it'll look fine. Like with Pixar, I think anything post the original Cars movie still holds up. Anything before that, I mean, look, A Bug's Life does not look awful, just to go as far back as I could, but you can definitely see the rough edges on it. The original Toy Story, the prior animated film, the first animated CG film, like, all the way through, is a very rough looking movie. It's nice, it's good. Animation wise, it's a little hard to look at. Not to a point that it's going to hurt you, but it's to a point where it's like, yeah, I can see it's not a visually appealing movie anymore. And that's really the big hurdle. And then you got the smaller studios where it's just hard. Because even with 2D, when it comes to like smaller studios, even if it doesn't move as gracefully or is well colored as like a Disney movie, it's fine. And like, I normally don't mind them. Like, it's stuff where it's like, okay, yeah, I don't really like the style in this, but it looks fine. When it comes to 3D, there's a lot of ones, Hoodwinked. There's that recent, or I think it's upcoming Pinocchio movie with Pauly Shore. It's just hard to look at, and it's like you don't get this as much with the other animation styles, so that's a big drawback to 3D. But that doesn't mean it's bad, and honestly, I hope people understand that. I really think I just droned on, and this went on much longer than I expected. But, yeah, whatever. I at least got some material out for you guys, and I hope at least this helps give you some understanding of how I feel about animation. I love it, even when it's not always the best looking stuff. There's some stuff that I do enjoy. So, yeah. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please consider supporting me by subscribing to my channel on YouTube. That's Psycam Films. I might be updating it to just Psycams. I'll see how that works out. But, either Psycam Films or Psycams. The only reason why I'm bringing that up is because I've had my logo say Psycams. I have my Patreon channel, which support my Patreon, www.patreon.com/SciCams, SAICAMS. So yeah, I might just change the YouTube channel to SciCams, but always try SciCam Films. It's right there. If you're watching this video on YouTube, then you can already just subscribe right there. If you're just listening to it through Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or any of those other ones that I have this on, just go look at that. And then, of course, just follow my podcast on those places. You got the audio version, and then you got the video version. Whichever one you prefer, just support it. Anyways, just thank you for listening. I hope to see you next time. And I promise you that, yes, next time I am definitely doing an animated feature.